Hello and welcome in. All right, we're gonna go give this another attempt. My first one got a little long and rambly, and I want to bring down my feedback into more of a concise sort of section. So we're gonna just talk for a couple minutes, and then we'll go do some playing and talk more about that in depth. But overall, first impressions for the demo, pretty solid. I'm impressed with a lot of. We'll just run down things real quick before I dive into difficulty in more depth. Presentation, fantastic upgrade. Both graphics are a nice little upgrade. The mesh detail makes stuff render a lot nicer. Just the terrain upgrades are great, and then just the professionalism in kind of how the courses are built. There's a very obvious upgrade in terms of the technical work on building courses, and all of those combined just make the game present so much better to the player in terms of the courses in it. Gold star for that one. Little things, there's lots of little changes that I love that just shows a little bit of attention to detail that is fantastic. Things having multiple players that you can tinker with, multiple bag setups you can tinker with, all of those are great little changes. The drop mechanic, little thing, but it adds a lot. Sometimes details can mean a lot, and that's one of those. Being able to move your ball around on the tee, nice little touch. That one was fun. So, A+ for all those. Then what else? Difficulty. I think you guys nail the lower difficulties. Putting players straight into perfect swing mode and kind of replacing the beginner difficulty with that is a great idea. 2K23 had sort of issues where I think the game was too hard for casual players, but maybe a little easy for higher skilled players. So long-time players are bumping up the difficulty pretty high and still not running into the challenge that they would necessarily want. And then casual players would, just play on the difficulties that it would give you, maybe try matchmaking or whatever, struggle really hard and then get frustrated and quit. So pushing players into kind of the easiest difficulty and not calling it beginner just to avoid the sort of psychological issues that people, run into where they don't want to play the baby mode, I want to play the normal mode, and it's just, hey, this game is hard, you need to work your way up to that. So I think it's a great way to kind of push people into difficulties that suit them and let them work their way up, as opposed to kind of putting them in the middle and trusting the player to know that they should bump it down. All of those are great changes. Pro, I think, is in a fairly good spot. Pro's kind of going to be the one difficulty where essentially your casual players are only ever going to play on Pro and below, and then your hardcore players are only ever going to play on Pro and above. So the lower difficulties can be tuned just for casual players, and they don't ever have to worry about engaging with sim or long time players that want a challenge, and vice versa. Above Pro, Master and Legendary, you're never going to have to tune those difficulties for casual players. They're just for people who want a more realistic experience or a harder experience. So I think Pro, the difficulty is okay. The one thing I'm unsure on is if the tilted swing mechanic should be locked on for that difficulty, and I'll get into that in a little bit more detail. Some people are freaking out over that. I have kind of gone back and forth, and I think I'm currently I'm gonna say Pro tilted swing, but a very kind of tenuous yes on that. And I'll get into that. But I like the mechanic. I'm not sure it should be locked on for Pro is the thing. Because Pro is a difficulty where if all of your online matchmaking is in Pro, odds are you're going to have casual players. If they play a couple hours of career and they like it, but they just get a little bored of that, they're going to want to try and jump into matchmaking and try that out. And, if they're still playing on a lower difficulty and they haven't been forced to try and do diagonal swings yet, that's going to be real frustrating for them, and it's going to be sort of a turnoff. And then vice versa, if you know what you're doing, you can just kind of avoid that mechanic anyways. So I think it's one of those where I would maybe leave that as an optional toggle for matchmaking, where it's just that particular thing is not locked, where maybe you're locked into pro swing, but you can still change some of the other options as you see fit, the swing camp being one of them. So you could both play it with it on if you found that beneficial, and I can explain later why that might happen, and then you can turn it off if you just find it frustrating. I think that's probably a decent compromise, but there's plenty of ways to kind of fix that. And then I think also long term, the higher difficulties are probably going to be too easy. I'll get into that into a little bit more detail when I start playing. They're not bad. I don't think we need any like major changes. It might just be some fine tuning to allow like a little bit more challenge, or just make it harder to hit perfect shots on the higher difficulties. Just so, again, like the higher level players in this game are already shooting kind of minus 18 pace for a full round without upgraded golfers at all, with just like the hardest difficulty on the weakest golfers in the game, and it's already looking to be like too easy for them. So that'll probably need to be tuned up, but like I think the bones are in a good spot. So no real massive changes needed there. Maybe just some tuning. What else? So I think that covered like all of the positive stuff. The stuff that I see that I might be worried about, like VC availability in this game. 23 was kind of a really slow, grindy game, and I think that can, again, a lot of your casual players are only going to play this for about 10 to 20 hours. You shouldn't necessarily be able to accomplish everything in your game in 10 to 20 hours, but you should be able to get like a complete satisfying experience out of this game in 10 to 20 hours. And if you have to grind for 100 hours before your golfer is remotely any good, then that's just not a fun experience for your casual players. They're not going to stick around, like obviously, you have to make money, like you want to sell the clubhouse passes and stuff. I get that. But like, if the first 10 hours of gameplay aren't fun for a casual player, none of them are sticking around to buy any of this stuff anyways. So like, your economy being fun and engaging is priority number one, and the monetization stuff will follow that if it's fun. So just like, if the VC is as grindy as it is in the demo in the real game, like again, we just got a demo, so that's a big assumption. It will probably be very different. But the game asks you to spend so much more VC on upgrading your player than it did in the last one, probably about double if I had to guess. Just based on some little glimpses that we get and how much it costs to upgrade your guy in 23. Like 23 was already really slow and grindy, and if it's even harder in this game, like all of the fun mechanics where you get to like tinker with new builds and new setups, and like you encourage your players to engage with mechanics and try new things, none of that works if they can't afford any of it in a reasonable amount of time. And if it takes 40 hours of playing to try something new, then nobody's going to do it, and all of those mechanics are for naught. So, just something to keep an eye out on in order for all of the fun stuff around my player, and like maybe being able to respec and try something different, or creating a new character. All of that stuff depends on like the upgrade tools and the money and all of that whatever stuff in the game economy to be available enough to do it, and not encourage players to just hoard it endlessly because it's so rare that you can only, you're only reasonably going to get one, and you have to use it correctly, or else, you've wasted it or whatever. So just making sure the economy actually works, just something to keep an eye on. But other than that, tons of stuff in this game look fantastic. Very promising for pre-launch for a PGA game. They're never going to be perfect at launch. All of the previous games have always required a little bit of tuning, so I'm not expecting things to be perfect this time around. But it's just more of the whole, it doesn't help to, or it doesn't hurt to keep an eye on things that might need, tweaked, changed. That's right. Let me go see what difficulty I am on. There we go. I think I'm on Master difficulty with Legend Swing. Just, to a certain extent, that just brings all of the graphic stuff that gets turned off in Master down to a certain extent, none of those things make the game like harder. They just make it more tedious. So I'm just gonna do like the legend swing difficulty, with just the visual stuff turned on, because you can kind of figure that out without it on. It just gets more tedious, and that'll kind of bring me to the whole like the tilted swing mechanic. I don't hate it, but the fact is, like, you can kind of just, if you just shot shape every shot, you can bring it back to straight. So the challenge of that mechanic, if you struggle to engage with it, is not necessarily learning how to do it. The challenge is having the patience to just revert it back to straight on every swing. And once you do that, like, the legend difficulty is, like, I find it fun and engaging right now, but I am a very average player of this game in terms of your, like, TGC Tours folks, the folks who, like, have been playing this game for a decade and play it a lot. Like, I'm not very good as far as those guys go. I'm below average for them. But, like, still above kind of your casual players.
This is the second cut here.
And then also, like, I think, yeah, I find it like, oh, it's challenging now, but I'm also playing with the, the hardest possible way to play this game, with the weakest golfers. Assuming that leveling your golfer up results in, like, substantial gains in terms of, like, power and accuracy, and making, like, all of the little meters your sweet spots bigger, then I think this game could very quickly get just trivially easy for the best players, even on the higher difficulties.
This putt is measuring in at 11 feet.
Again, my short game, not very good. I'm also not paying that much attention, so, like, again, like,
let's give this
we're on hole 2. I've mostly hit pretty perfect shots, and then just kind of faffed about with the putting. Like, admittedly, like, I'm not playing very good. It is hard to talk and focus on playing at the same time, which is the reason why my first video went so long. But it's just one of those, like, okay, I can just tilt the swing thing, and now I can just hit trivially straight shots. I'm not doing that all of the time. Like, I definitely still have struggles in this game, but I feel like, there's, there's a little bit of that, oh, okay, like, once people figure out how to just work their way around it and upgrade their stuff, then, like, there's no difficulty that gives you, like, an interesting sim experience where you have to manage misses and things like that. And I think that's where this game shines on higher difficulties, is when it makes you, like, actually make real life golf decisions because you can't hit it so accurately. Things like, oh man, I can reach this par 5 and 2, but there's so much trouble around, like, I don't know if this is a smart move because, like, I'm probably going to lose a shot hitting it into the water, as opposed to it just being an automatic go for it. Or having things like, left is a better miss than right on this hole, I'm going to aim more left so that if I do miss, I miss there instead of right. Things like that. Like, all of these decisions that you have to make, and, like, risk analysis and kind of, like, risk-reward sort of, decision making. Of, like, when to be aggressive, when to be conservative, all of these things that you have to do in a real-life round in order to score. Like, I've gotten little glimpses of that as I've learned the mechanics of this game, where, like, you get into that zone where you're good enough to keep it on the planet, and you can kind of, like, you can sort of hit shots and hit your targets, but not accurately enough to just mindlessly fire at all the pins. Like, that, I think, is where this game would shine. And, like, I've gotten little glimpses of that, but I think that will disappear once players play more of this game and start leveling their players up. And then it just gets back to, okay, like, it's easy enough that I just fire at all the pins again.
4-foot putt for us. Okay, 2 over par at the moment.
And it's like, I think the tilted swing mechanic is a neat idea. I don't have, like, an immediate solution on it. But to me, it's just, like, a little troubling that you can just straight up avoid it. by just shot shaping everything. I don't know, like I think it's fun, but it's also one of those where if it's just straight up better, or like to just change it to vertical, and all you have to do is have the, it's a test of patience more than it's a test of skill, and that's kind of like my gripe with it. Is it's a fun idea, but in a competitive environment where you just need to score better, like, nobody's gonna want to engage with that if it makes it harder when there is a trivial way to make it easier.
And ripping out a birdie after bogeying the last. That's what I like to see.
And then again, and it's like I'm also not playing on like full legendary, but most of the legendary difficulty mechanics just come from hiding information from the player, and like you can figure most of that stuff out, like in terms of like, like how tilted the swing plane is, or where you're aiming and things like that. Like you can figure that out. It's just more tedious. So, and I think, and that's the tough part, is that you ideally you want the difficulty in your higher levels to come from like difficulty in execution, as opposed to like, or like it's a test of skill, not a test of patience. And I think right now most of the high difficulty, what do you want to call it? The high difficulty challenge comes from patience and not skill. Again, I am not a good player at this game. In the like, on the grand scale of things, yes, like I am better than casual players. But for those who have been around since TGC1, I'm a very mediocre player. I don't take my time. I just kind of play casually and smack the ball around. But I know roughly how most of the mechanics work, and so. Again, I 4-putted the second hole or whatever I did because I just wasn't paying attention and I was trying to talk at the same time. And I, I'm still potentially going to shoot under par this round if I do well on the last hole. And realistically, haven't really had any big misses at all in Legend Swing, because I can just tilt the swing plane vertically. And also, it's just like it's not trivial to hit perfect shots, but it's not really that difficult either. And I fear, like, once you start maxing players out, that it will just become straight up trivial. And like, part of the longevity for this game for skilled players is it needs to be challenging and engaging. And if it's not challenging or engaging, then that hardcore community that hangs around and plays hundreds of hours over the 2-year cycle of the game, like they're gonna lose interest and move on. So I think, like, ultimately, kind of wrap up, like the lower difficulty levels, I think you nailed those this time around for sure. 100%, those are great. Middle ones, overall very well. Like, there's some potential issues that might need tweaked, but like it's in a fairly good spot. And then the higher ones, I think the bones are there. There's little glimpses of just like a really engaging kind of sim mode to this, but I don't think it's there yet. I think it needs a lot of tweaking before that will work. And I think it's just like it's a little easy right now is the thing. So, anyways, thank you for your patience. Thanks for following along. Like, hopefully the feedback was helpful. If you're somebody like looking for advice on, hey, should I get this game or not? I think like right now this looks really promising. If you liked any of the previous games, this one looks like probably the strongest one in the franchise. I didn't even get into any of the designer stuff. That's kind of my forte. Designer stuff looks amazing. If you like designing in this game, you're probably gonna love just the changes in this one. It looks huge. So, but yeah, overall pretty positive. What do you want to call it? Experience so far. I think there's a couple pitfalls that might need to be avoided, or like some tweaks made to kind of capitalize on things, but the bones are there, and it just needs like a little bit of tweaking here and there. But yeah, it was fun. Thanks everybody. We'll catch you in the next one. Until then, have a good one.